Hello, my name is Amina Peffor, and today I'll be discussing about the Louisiana Slave Database. Basically, for this project, it was in my Social Work 300 class, and we looked up all this data about the slaves of Louisiana, how their lifestyle was and all that, the ages, races, what they did, and etc. So, for the first figure, we have here for the figure 1, I redid the figure 3. Sorry, meant to do that. For figure 1, we have, which is called the frequencies of slaves sold in Louisiana. Basically, from what I researched or looked at with the database, this particular thing, this topic, was that based on the data, there were various dates of sale of the frequency of the slaves. Basically, the largest numbers were at least 45,000 slaves on the sale date, which was was on January 1st, 1800. And the lowest number was at 0, of course. The sale date was on January 1st, 1750. And from what I've seen from the data of the graph, it makes sense to me because one reason for what I've seen was how each year the slaves increased, the numbers increased of the slave, basically. But the biggest year was, of course, what I recently said, was 1800, which was, I meant to put 45,000. I'm sorry. Anyway, I apologize. Basically, the graph shows the frequencies of the database of the slaves within Louisiana, of course. Next, we have figure 2, which is the frequency of the age of the slaves, basically. And from what I've seen, is from the data shown, it shows basically the values of the slaves. I guess you could say, like, how can I put it away? Like, for this one, it was 5, which I had to ask somebody for help about. But anyway, basically it was 5 is like how many slaves are in this age group. And 5 was in the 20 to 24 age group. And I was like, oh, okay. But in the data I've gathered is from each, like the values represent each age group, basically. So per se, like, but what didn't really surprise me was how, sorry, I apologize. What interested me was that how, in that age group, the 20 to 24 age group, I could see why there were like 5 slaves for each thing, because, like, they could do the manual labor per se and whatnot, being able to do that and all that. Next, we have the last figure, which is the percentage of the different the characteristics of slaves. Basically, the characteristics, the characteristics, there we go, that had the greatest percentage was at least above 30%, which was the good bond. Sorry, I couldn't pronounce that word. I apologize. Then I apologize. We have another. Excuse me. I apologize. That's so rude of me. We have another characteristic from the data were runaways, and helps runaways was at 30%, and from the least characteristic, which was at least by 0%, was the gambler. From my understanding of the data that was gathered, was at the most popular characteristic was the good, because how if the slave did what they told the master, they were good. But if they didn't behave or whatever, or they would try to run away, they would probably most likely have some very, 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 very awful punishments to deal with. So basically what my summary basically sums up is, during the slavery, they were mentally and physically abused, like beaten and talked down upon, which was very, 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 heartbreaking. So, however, they went through many trials and tribulations, as I told, during that time, even though they were called by very derogatory names, such as nigger, which was basically downgrading them, which I said, basically. I previously said they were beaten. The women were raped, of course. Even though I did not experience the very awful time period, I knew from various times in my schooling, we would always hear about the slaves and whatnot. And I just wanted to know more about what they did and all that. And I knew from my learning of school, my schooling, of course, they were basically brought from Africa to, the Americas and, all the other stuff. I mean, you know what I mean. So in conclusion, from the database, it was very, informative to me, because it gave the key points to where the slaves were doing during that time. And at a time where it was very hard for them, because I couldn't even imagine what they went through and how the information, it was interesting to know what they did and how they lived in Louisiana. Also, I want to make a key point I meant to put in the video firsthand, was this database shows how the slaves were in Louisiana. The database describes on how the ages, races, dates, and etc. And I meant to put in the video before I started, was the highest percentage was for the slaves was 80%, of course, black, which didn't surprise me. So this concludes the video.